Hey Keith, why are you here? You don't have a seat, just go home now. That day, I was at an Italian restaurant to attend a celebration party for the successful completion of a project, which also served as a welcome party. Upon entering, I checked for my seat. Huh? Keith, what's up? I don't have a seat. What? As I stood puzzled at the entrance of the restaurant, Landon, my boss, came over with a smirk on his face. Hey Keith, why are you even here? Hi, Landon. I was just troubled because my name isn't on the seating chart. What are you babbling about? You don't have a seat. It seems that he had arranged this welcome party and deliberately hadn't prepared a seat for me. As he loudly insulted me without caring about the stares from those around us at the entrance of the restaurant, a well-dressed, portly man hurried over. Landon, do you even know what you're saying? My name is Keith. I'm a 22-year-old employee. Having started working right after high school, this year marks my 4th year in the workforce. There's a reason why I didn't go to college and instead chose to work. This was because in the fall of his senior year of high school, Marco, my father, who until then had been in good health and had never caught a cold, suddenly fell sick and was hospitalized. During dinner with my family, my father suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. I could hear my mother's scream like cry from afar as I stood frozen, unable to do anything but watch as he was taken away in an ambulance. At the hospital, he was diagnosed with acute myocardial infarction, a terrifying disease where the blood vessels that supply blood to the heart muscle become blocked, rapidly cutting off blood flow. Fortunately, he was able to survive because he was able to undergo surgery at the hospital immediately, but since part of his heart's function did not recover, he could not work as hard as before and was forced to take a leave of absence, as his progress had to be monitored and controlled through a rehabilitation program and medication. He had been a top salesman for a large local manufacturer of electrical machinery, and I believe we were fairly well off. However, when my father became seriously sick at a young age and was unable to work as a salesman as he wished, and my mother devoted herself to taking care of him, I decided to become independent as soon as possible to give my parents peace of mind, and decided to find a job after graduating from high school, instead of continuing on to higher education. My parents repeatedly tried to persuade me, saying, "We have enough for college expenses. Don't worry if you want to pursue higher education." But my determination was firm. I decided to find a job, but it was difficult because I was already approaching the fall of my senior year of high school, and it was too late in the year to make the shift from seeking higher education to seeking a job. Nevertheless, wanting to ease the burden on my bedridden father and my mother, who was devoted to his care, I aimed for a job that paid well, but it was difficult as the job openings themselves were already gone. That's when a glimmer of hope appeared. My father offered me a job at the company where he worked. Seeing my desperate search for a job, he spoke to the president of his company, asking if he could help find a job for me. "Keith, I just got a call from Mr. Johnson of our company." "What phone call?" "I'm talking about your employment. I'm a good friend of his, you know, if he's hiring high school graduates. I've asked him to interview you too." "Well, thank you. But only because he did me a favor in getting you on the hiring process. The deadline for the application screening is tomorrow. If it passes, they are planning to schedule an interview in a week. What do you think? Do you want to give it a shot?" "Of course, but your company is a big company, right? Do you think I'll be able to make it?" "What are you talking about? Don't be so negative. You'll be fine." "Thanks, Dad. I'll do my best." His company, Ibis Electric, was the largest in our area and a global leader in electrical machinery components. The starting salary for a high school graduate was significantly higher than any other job listing I had seen, and I was determined to get this offer to not let my father down. That said, of course, there is no special treatment, such as nepotism, and I was just told that there is a hiring window, and I have to pass both the application screening and the interview, just like everyone else. With my mother's help, I prepared my resume and the cover letter overnight and managed to pass the application screening. Then came the day of the final interview. Before I knew it, it was December, and the end of the fiscal year was approaching. This additional hiring meant there were fewer competitors than I expected. After a while, I was called into the interview room, where a portly, dignified man who seemed to be President Johnson was seated, along with 2 other HR personnel. I greeted them as practiced and delivered the self-introduction I had rehearsed countless times, facing straight ahead. Then, after fielding several questions and stumbling a bit, I believe I managed to respond confidently, showing the results of my interview practice. Before I knew it, the interview time had swiftly come to an end. An HR representative told me, "We'll contact you later by email regarding the result," to which I somehow managed to nod before leaving the interview room. I hurried to the hospital where my father was admitted, to report about the day. "Keith, how did it go?" "Well, honestly, I'm not sure. They said they'd inform me of the result by email later." Hearing my report, he quietly nodded. "Well, I don't know if you'll get a good job, but you're about to graduate from high school and go out into the world." "Yes." "Do you remember what I always tell you?" With a serious look, he posed this question. In response, I nodded deeply, indicating my understanding. Since I was young, he had incessantly instilled a particular lesson in me. Of course, we value our relationships with people and never forget to have compassion for others, right? Yes, that's right. Whether it's work, friends, or family, relationships between people are what matter most. As you go out into the world and engage with more people than ever before, if you always respect others and act with compassion, everything will go well. Also, I playfully interrupted his following words. Don't just think it, act on that feeling, right? I've heard it so much, I can already hear it in my mind's ear. Ha ha ha. All right, but if you've got it in your head, then you'll be fine. Dad, thank you for everything this time. I ended up needing your help after all. You don't have to say that, okay? It's because I got sick that I caused you unnecessary worry. It's a parent's responsibility to do the least they can. You're a smart guy, even without your parents' favoritism, and you have the right spirit. Don't forget, if your job search turns out successful, it's because of your own abilities. With those words, he smiled kindly. When the offer letter arrived at home later, my mother and I cried tears of joy together. I managed to secure a job just in time, right after my high school graduation. As a celebration of my first job, she left my dad in the hospital and took me to a steakhouse. The taste of that steak and my father's jealous face are memories I'll never forget. And so, I stepped into society full of great hopes as a working adult. Upon joining the company, my first assignment was in the sales department, where my father had once worked. Known as one of the most demanding jobs in the company, the sales department was also considered one of its most prestigious. On my first day, as I nervously introduced myself, I was greeted by a room filled with ringing phones and a tense, hostile atmosphere. Everyone's a bit swamped with work right now. Try to find something you can do and start by going through the training materials at your desk. Also, answering the phones is a rookie's job, so I'm counting on you. Yes. My colleagues and superiors were all busy, seemingly lacking the time and resources to train a newcomer like me. The job of sales was incredibly diverse, involving not only selling products but also handling corporate sales for large orders and coordinating with numerous suppliers to ensure a steady supply of necessary parts and materials. I proactively sought out tasks to learn, and, following my father's teachings, I always put compassion for others first in my work. At first, I memorized the names and faces of about 40 people in the sales department within 3 days. I was the first to pick up the phone, making sure to capture all the details of the caller's request and relay messages accurately. Through small acts of consideration, taking the initiative to find work, and being the first to help where hands were needed, I constantly thought about what I could do and what others needed, and I kept on acting accordingly. Max, there was an inquiry from Anderson Company about the delivery deadline for some parts. I've attached the product assembly schedule document to the email, so please check it and get back to them. Keith, got it. Thanks a lot. Your work really covers all the bases. Things have somehow gotten easier since you came. No, it's not, but thanks. Yes, truly it is. I've been able to breathe a little easier thanks to you. Hey, how about you come with me to a sales call next time? Thank you, I'd love to join you. Thus, the gap between me and my senior colleagues and superiors, who might have initially seen a newcomer as a burden, gradually closed, and the tense atmosphere softened, leading to smoother communication. As a result, I got more opportunities to learn and rapidly picked up the job, and the joy of being assigned my own clients in record time, just 6 months after joining, is unforgettable. I also succeeded in securing several significant contracts by adopting a considerate approach towards clients and partners, who appreciated my attitude. Every time I closed one contract, I received more and more referrals from clients, and my sales performance improved remarkably. 3 years after I was assigned to the sales department, I had grown into one of the top salesperson in the company, competing for the top spot. All of this was thanks to my father's teachings. By the time I had matured into an excellent salesperson, his health had finally improved enough for him to return to work. Actually, after the 18-month sick leave benefit period had ended, he had already been working from home in an administrative role through remote work, but this time, he was making a full return to the office. Seeing him, dressed sharply in a suit and heading off to work after such a long time, moved me to tears. My father, who had suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed with a pale face 3 years ago, was then a little thinner, but just as lively as he used to be, greeting with various people at work. The entrance to the company's office building was crowded with people delighted by his return since the morning, and I was impressed, knowing that he truly was a top salesperson well remembered by Mr. Johnson. Everyone, I apologize for any concern you may have had about my health problems. I am back in full swing today and will continue to dedicate myself to the development of the company. Marco, we've been waiting for you. Congratulations on your return. Please continue to share your goodwill with all of us. Afterward, it seemed he was called by Mr. Johnson and briskly headed to the president's office. After watching him leave, I felt somewhat curious about his popularity and asked a senior colleague next to me for the reason. I learned that he had a nickname, the legendary bonus distributor. The origin of the nickname was that every time he clinched a big deal, boosting the company's performance dramatically, the company paid small bonuses to all employees as a way of sharing the profits. Thanks to his sales achievements, bonuses had been distributed to all employees numerous times, making him a hero in their eyes. Learning about this side of him that I hadn't known at home filled me with pride. And then, in the afternoon of the same day, I was suddenly called to the president's office. "Excuse me. Sorry for calling you out so suddenly." "No problem. What is this about, Mr. Johnson?" "Actually, I wanted to discuss the possibility of transferring you to one of our subsidiary companies." "Excuse me. I was talking about this with your father this morning." Hearing that, I remembered seeing him heading to the president's office in the morning. Transfer, as in. Don't take this the wrong way. We highly value your work. Then why? Well, it's actually your father's idea. Mr. Johnson explained the details of the transfer, and I agreed to accept the offer after understanding the reasons behind it. "I understand. I'll do my best." Thus, as my father returned, I was transferred to the company by Mr. Johnson, The new company specialized in sensor devices and, acknowledging my past achievements, assigned me to their sales department. Greeted by the warm welcomes of my new colleagues in the sales department, I felt nervous but grateful for the opportunity. "Nice to meet you. I've worked in sales in my previous job, so I'll do my utmost to be of service." "Wow, that's reassuring. We're counting on you." Welcomed by friendly colleagues, I felt good about accepting the offer, but there was one person who seemed to have it in for me from the start, a troublesome figure. His name was Landon, my direct superior. Landon, a graduate of the highly prestigious University of New York, was a troublesome individual who often boasted about his elite status. On the first day, when I went to greet him, he openly mocked me for being a high school graduate, and since then, I've been enduring his harassment every day. "I'm Keith, newly assigned to the sales department. I look forward to working with you." "So, you're a high school graduate, right?" "Well, yes." "Wow, really a high school grad? Unbelievable." "Unbelievable? What do you mean by that?" "I'm the elite who graduated from University of New York. Working with someone who's just a high school graduate like you is embarrassing and too bad." Landon sneered, ridiculing my educational background from the moment we met. From then on, Landon began to spend his days making fun of me because of my low education and incompetence. One day before a meeting, "Hey, Keith, make sure you prepare the materials for tomorrow's meeting properly." "Tomorrow? I haven't been informed of any schedule." "What an idiot. I'm talking about my meeting." "Excuse me. Being kind enough to give a job to someone as incompetent as you, who only has a high school diploma, I must be really nice. Make sure you do it properly, right?" "Understood." Like this, Landon began to dump all sorts of tasks on me. Despite struggling with Landon's treatment, a few months into my job, I was selected to be part of a major project related to the IoT implementation for a large transportation company. In today's society, sensors are used in all kinds of places. Not only in automatic doors, but also in toilets, faucets, lighting, and many other household applications. The advancement of IoT is being pushed forward in various scenarios, and it's no exaggeration to say that the future of our business hinges on the success of this venture. Eager to contribute, I joined this significant project, but Landon's harassment didn't stop there. "Keith, I've booked conference room A for tomorrow's meeting." "Tomorrow? What's the meeting tomorrow for?" "What are you talking about? There's a pre-presentation executive report tomorrow, right?" "Wait a minute, I was told that the meeting is scheduled for the day after tomorrow." "What? Not this again. What a hassle." Thus, being deliberately given the wrong schedule was a daily routine, and on one occasion, harassment continued, such as being asked to make major revisions to presentation materials the night before a presentation because the materials needed for a meeting with a client were hidden, or not being told only to myself about communications. "Hey, Keith, you took the documents from my desk without permission." "What are you talking about?" "What is information I hadn't given out to you included in your presentation materials?" "If it's about those documents, I received them from the chief before the executive report." "Huh? Are you sucking up to the chief now? People with low education are so crafty." "Sucking up? The chief simply provided me with the necessary information for the document I was preparing." "Hey, don't get cocky with me. You're just a high school grad." I couldn't bring myself to show Landon any respect or compassion. I could empathize with a positive attitude, but I saw no reason or room to entertain his malicious and petty actions. Even from an outsider's perspective, the harassment I faced from Landon seemed excessive, and my colleagues, concerned for me, often stepped in to help. If there was any information I wasn't aware of, they would report it to me, and if there were important emails from Landon to the project team excluding me, someone would forward them to me. With the support of my teammates, I managed to visit the client multiple times, presenting various solutions using sensor technology to address their issues. This is fantastic. Let's finalize the contract. This will significantly reduce our transportation costs and the workload of our delivery people as well. I'd love to have you on board. Thank you very much. As a result, the project was a success, and we secured a significant contract. After working tirelessly for 6 months since my transfer and wrapping up this major project, Alex, our division head, decided to hold a celebration party for me, doubling as a project success party. I was looking forward to my first company party since joining, but after work, I headed to a slightly upscale Italian restaurant with my colleagues for the celebration. It seemed that the party was set up to include Mr. William and the executives since we were celebrating a major contract win. The restaurant was reserved by our company, and many employees involved in the project had already gathered. Wow, President William and Executive Director Reynolds are here too. I'm nervous. Where's my seat? Seems like we're split into 4 tables. Tom, you're next to Mr. Reynolds, I guess. Oh my, what should I do? Just enjoy your meal like usual. Wait, what? Keith, what's up? There is no name of mine here. What? While checking the seating chart at the entrance, I couldn't find my name. Who organized this event again? Oh no, it's Landon. Landon, no way. My seat was the only one not prepared, and as I was hesitating at the entrance, Landon, noticing me, approached from the back of the restaurant with a smirk. Hey Keith, why are you here? Good evening, Landon. I came to join as part of the project team for the celebration. What are you blabbering about? There's no seat for you. It turns out Landon had arranged this welcome party and intentionally hadn't prepared a seat for me. Basically, a high school grad like you sucking up to everyone and then claiming to have played a part in securing the contract. That's a bad joke. Sucking up, what do you mean? I thought you might be deluded into thinking you contributed to securing the contract when you can't do anything by yourself, so I just wanted to make it clear to you. Landon then monopolized the conversation, belittling me loudly at the entrance without concern for the surrounding stares. Suddenly, Mr. William, looking furious, approached from behind Landon. Landon, do you know whom you're talking to? Mr. William, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I understand what you're meaning. I'm saying to you, what are you talking about? Don't you know who he is? Of course, I know him quite well. He's the incompetent employee with only a high school diploma, right? You fool. Keith was brought in as a potential future president at the request of his father, a major shareholder of this company. William, turning rapidly from pale to flushed with anger, scolded Landon, who was shocked by his words. In reality, I joined this company as a candidate for its future president. The reason behind this move was because my father is a major shareholder of the company. My father, who had been a top salesman with extensive connections and always valued relationships, had bought a large amount of stock to help the company out of a financial crisis 10 years ago at the request of Mr. William, who was then a client. Unknown to me, my father, who had earned more than the average employee through incentives, had established an investment firm and was involved in stock investments. Given the strong trust from my father, who is also a major shareholder, I joined a company as a potential successor to Mr. William, who was troubled by succession issues despite the financial troubles being over. After Mr. William explained how I joined a company, Landon quickly turned pale. There was also a complicated story involving Mr. Johnson, who was approached by my father about transferring me to this company in order to take over the business. Then Mr. Johnson offered me this transfer, hoping that the company where Landon, his son, worked would grow further. Landon's haughty demeanor was likely due to being spoiled as Mr. Johnson's son, leading him to mistakenly believe that he was destined to be the next president of this company. It seems Mr. Johnson wanted his son to be exposed to society by working at this company rather than his own. A clear case of a parent's intentions being lost on their child. Wait a minute, no way. Why would a low-educated high school grad be the future president? I was supposed to be the president of this company. Shut up. I accepted you because of my long-standing relationship with Mr. Johnson, but the complaints from employees are endless. And how many clients have banned you from entering their premises? Think what you've done. That's because they were incompetent. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Landon refused to admit his fault, and after shouting angrily, he stormed out of the restaurant. After Landon left, I took his seat, and we celebrated the project's success and my joining the company. After the meal, Mr. William personally apologized for Landon's actions. "Keith, I am truly sorry. I had no idea Landon was such a terrible person like that. It must have been difficult to deal with the son of a business associate you were entrusted with. I'm fine, but given his behavior, the damage seems more extensive than I thought. Yes, I'll start investigating as soon as possible. I'll take this opportunity to clean out all the mess from the company." "Sounds good. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help." We firmly agreed on the next steps from a management perspective. The next day, Landon, whom I had intended to interview immediately, stopped coming to the office. In addition to this, employees who had endured his harassment, flaunting his status as the son of a client company's president, collectively blew the whistle on his arrogant behavior, sloppy work, and nuisances. It appears he habitually belittled others as incompetent or uneducated, and resorted to petty insults like poor or ugly towards those he deemed inferior in academic credentials. Upon receiving these reports, Mr. William set up an internal reporting channel within the compliance department and conducted a survey, which revealed a volume of complaints far exceeding expectations. Efforts were made to verify the facts with Landon himself, but he continued to refuse coming to work. Incredibly, he claimed to have suffered mental distress due to unfair admonition from the company and demanded compensation. The company, of course, did not entertain his claims and dismissed him for his refusal to attend work. Even after his dismissal, Landon was reportedly blustering about unfair dismissal and vowing to fight back with legal action. However, Mr. Johnson, Landon's financial backer and his father, disowned him, and rumors suggest he has since been cast out and left destitute. This situation underscores the critical importance of interpersonal relationships in the workplace. This experience has profoundly reminded me of the value of caring for and cherishing others. Moving forward, I remain committed to empathy and compassion. I'm going to continue to work hard every day, never forgetting to be considerate of others and feeling responsible as the next president of the company. If a loser like you ever gets a beautiful girlfriend, I'll apologize. I attended a middle school reunion. Some people really never change. I ran into Michael, a wealthy boy who used to bully me back then. He started with insults right away, but just a minute later, he turned pale. My name is Nathan. Due to my job, I spend most of the year abroad. But currently, I'm back in my homeland, staying at my parents' house. There are many wonderful aspects to the country of my birth, but other countries offer different landscapes and cultures, which are equally enriching. Especially, being away from old acquaintances makes one feel much more at ease. Hence, receiving an invitation to a middle school reunion a few days after returning home troubled me greatly. I'm supposed to be in the country for about a month this time, and it'll be a while before I go abroad again. The date of the reunion coincides with the time I'll still be here. It seems to be a grand 100th anniversary reunion, set to take place at the best hotel in town. Surely, most of my classmates will attend, including Michael. I've been a target of bullying since I was a child. Michael was one of the worst offenders. As the son of a wealthy business owner, Michael flaunted his wealth and did whatever he pleased. Surrounded by a group of followers, he would pick on me almost every day. And his harassment only escalated over time. I think he targeted me because I lived a modest life. My father was unemployed when I was in middle school. To someone like Michael, who enjoyed flaunting his status, I must have been the perfect target. He would brag about his top-of-the-line belongings compared to the bare minimum I had, and at every opportunity, he'd loudly say things like, "You're so poor, you can't even afford a pencil." At one point, Michael deliberately damaged my bicycle. He even had the audacity to send me a worse-conditioned bicycle he likely picked up from a scrap collection. It was less of bullying and more of an outright oppression. After middle school, I parted ways with my classmates, and as I grew older, I found peace of mind. However, the scars in my heart from those days took a long time to heal. Attending the reunion might be a good opportunity to put those feelings to rest. Reliving those painful memories, I marked my attendance and sent the RSVP. I come from a family of 3, my parents and me. My father was a violinist. And my mother, although not famous, was a pianist. However, when I was in elementary school, my father suddenly got sick and could no longer play the violin, leaving him unemployed. To support the family, my mother started a piano school, and we lived modestly. She probably never gave up hope that my father would be able to play the violin again someday. I've seen my father play the violin only once. As a child, I was deeply moved by his performance and aspired to become a violinist like him. But a few years later, when he could no longer play, I felt disillusioned. My father, too, seemed to have given up, never touching the violin again. I also took violin lessons and was often praised by my teacher for being a true son of my father. However, having seen him play only once, I lacked real appreciation and was more frustrated than anything else. After boasting to my elementary school friends that my father was a violinist, he got sick, and I was branded a liar. "You said your dad was a violinist, but that's a lie, right?" "It's not a lie. He's a world-famous violinist." "But my mom said your dad is unemployed." "That's..." "Bring him over. Have him play the violin in front of everyone." Well, gradually, I began to resent my father, and by the time I was in middle school, our relationship had deteriorated due to my rebellious phase, to the point where we barely spoke. And then, in my second year of middle school, I finally unleashed my frustration on my mother. "Why do you keep sticking with that man? Because of him, everyone's making fun of me." "Nathan, listen. I've only seen him play the violin once, and that was when I was little. I don't want to live with someone like that." "Nathan, please hear me out. Your father has a condition called focal dystonia." "Focal dystonia." With tears, my mother explained what focal dystonia was. "It's a condition where, in specific movements related to playing an instrument, one loses control over their body parts. It often affects highly skilled individuals. There's no abnormality in the brain or other functions, so he seems perfectly normal otherwise." Unaware of his illness, my father thought his inability to play was due to lack of practice. Increasing his practice only worsened his condition, eventually making it impossible for him to play at all. This untreatable and rarely curable disease forced me to reevaluate my perspective on my father and led to our reconciliation. At the same time, I realized that my father developed focal dystonia precisely because he was a brilliant violinist. I then remembered the sole time I saw my father playing the violin. I admired his cool demeanor. Upon graduating middle school, I resolved to go to Austria to become a violinist. "Dad, I didn't understand anything about you and failed to empathize. I'm truly sorry." No, it's okay. I must have disappointed you many times. I should have communicated better. I'm truly sorry. And I want to follow the same path as you. I want to be a top-class violinist. After graduating middle school, I'm thinking of enrolling in this school in Austria. Is that so? You too? Right. It might not be an easy path, but I believe you can do it. Give it your best. He chose the same path as you. I guess he is really your child. Nathan, I'm also a graduate of that school, just like you. I went there after finishing middle school. Dad, I hardly mentioned my intention to go to Austria to anyone, and the only rumor that spread was about my father being unemployed, which made me a target for Michael during those times. Carrying all these memories, I resolved to become a distinguished violinist, active on the world stage like my father. With this determination, I graduated and successfully enrolled in the music school in Austria. Despite the school's reputation for being highly competitive, I made it in. Yet, the harassment from the past was traumatic enough that the mere sight of the reunion invitation troubled me. But I used that as motivation to work hard. 2 weeks passed, and the day of the reunion arrived. As expected, it was at a major local hotel. They had even reserved the largest hall for the event. Perhaps because it was the 100th anniversary, the place was overflowing with people, to the point where it seemed fewer had missed than attended. Hey, is that Nathan? Long time no see. It's been a while, you look well. Is that you, Nathan? Yeah, long time no see. Do you remember me? You sat in front of me back then. I was surprised by the generally positive attitude of my classmates. But everyone has grown up, I suppose. Conversations flowed, and some even apologized for their past actions. I felt a sense of relief, thinking attending was the right decision. The worries I had when I first saw the reunion notice seemed to have been unfounded. From what I could see, almost all my former classmates were there. Which means Michael must be here too. I didn't want to see him, but perhaps Michael, too, had grown up and changed. As I was chatting and enjoying a drink with my classmates, Michael finally appeared and headed straight towards me. Well, if it isn't Nathan, the son of an unemployed man, how have you been? Still living the pool life? Unfortunately, Michael hadn't changed at all. His expression screamed winter, reminiscent of a bully in a playground. Despite being an adult, he was flaunting his high-brand logo-printed suit and bag, surrounded by several women. But these women weren't our classmates. It seemed like Michael just brought them along for show. You're still the same, Michael. I responded without batting an eyelid. What are you on about? You're probably still living the same old life, aren't you? Still can't afford a pencil, or is your bike still broken? He retorted with a laugh. Hey Michael, who is this guy? This guy was dirt poor back in middle school. I even gifted him a bicycle once. Really? But Michael, don't they serve champagne here? I'll get you a bottle each, worth $10,000, at your hostess bar later. Jay, thank you. Ignoring the fact that this was a reunion, Michael and the hostesses were getting excited. Even my classmates around us were taken aback by this display. Well, Nathan, I guess someone at the bottom like you wouldn't even get close to such women. Oh right, should I give you one? But they're expensive, so you probably couldn't afford them. If a loser like you ever gets a beautiful girlfriend, I'll apologize. Michael, that's so mean. Oh, I'll apologize as many times as you want. Michael laughed crudely, but a beautiful woman swiftly passed by him. Michael and the classmates around were taken aback by her presence. The woman stood next to me, intertwining her arm with mine. With a firm yet smiling demeanor, she looked at Michael and said, "Oh, so you'll apologize?" tall, with beautiful straight blonde hair. She was my fiancée, Marie. Marie smiled at me before turning back to Michael. "Excuse me, who might you be?" This is my classmate, Michael." "I see. Michael, nice to meet you. I'm Marie, Nathan's fiancée and also his business partner. So, will you be apologizing?" Marie introduced herself to Michael. Michael, along with the women and his followers, seemed stunned. After a moment of silence, Michael's voice trembled as he spoke. "What? No way, you, a poor guy with her. That's a lie. You're just showing off. There's no way someone like you, who didn't even go to high school, could be with such a beauty. Engaged. Don't make me laugh. That must be a lie too, just like your dad, the famous violinist lie." Michael was fuming, much like a wild boar. The women he brought were speechless. Marie retorted sharply, "I won't tolerate anyone speaking ill of Nathan's father, not even Nathan's friends. Really, Nathan, is this person truly a friend? I can't believe it." She was shaking with anger. Determined to get back at Michael for my middle school days, I decided to tell him about what happened after I graduated. "Look, it's not about showing off. You seem to think I didn't continue my education, but I went to a school in Austria to become a professional violinist. By the way, Nathan's father is a wonderful violinist. He just had to retire because of his illness, but Nathan isn't a liar at all." I talked about my dream to become like my father and how I enrolled in the music school, the difficulty of getting into that school, and how my father, recognized for his talent from a young age, had also attended the same school in Austria after finishing middle school. With Marie's support, Michael couldn't interrupt while I was speaking. "That's the story. I've graduated from that school and now spend most of the year abroad." "What? But you told the teacher you weren't going to high school." "To a high school in this country. You misunderstood." He must have only heard the part about not going to high school. "I'm back in the country now because I have a concert scheduled in a few days." No. How? Why do you?" "And now, please enjoy a violin performance by our alumnus, Nathan. He is considered a promising violinist and is touring the world. He has graciously agreed to perform a special piece for us today." As the announcement echoed through the venue, I took my violin from my bag and headed to the stage. During my performance, Marie helped me by turning the pages of my music. The performance ended to roaring applause, and as I stepped off the stage, I saw Michael, finally believing, looking stunned. A few days after the reunion, I successfully completed the tour. Marie supported me at every performance, always there by my side. I'm truly grateful to her, especially for putting Michael in his place at the reunion. After the tour in this country, I decided to marry Marie and went home to tell my parents. "It's been a while since we sat down like this, Nathan. Last time was before you left for Austria, right?" "That's right. Today, I'm here to introduce her. This is Marie. To cut to the chase, I want to marry her." Oh my. I met him during our time at the music school in Austria. I was drawn to his relentless effort and passion. He always talked about you, aspiring to become a violinist like you. "Nathan, please, give us your blessing to get married." "Of course, you've succeeded on your tour and built a solid reputation. I've even received messages from a few violinists and friends. Let's celebrate today. Marie, is there anything you don't eat?" With that, our marriage was decided, and my name became known in this country thanks to the tour. It became a topic among my classmates, spreading from friend to friend and eventually throughout their networks. As expected, Michael was overheard jumping on the bandwagon at his usual hangouts. However, his exaggerated stories were met with skepticism, and after classmates exposed his past actions, the women he surrounded himself with disappeared one by one. Eventually, his father, a big company president, heard about his behavior and gave him a stern reprimand. Michael, who had been working at his father's company, was transferred to a regional branch, putting an end to his privileged behavior. I never received an apology, but the reunion and subsequent events healed the wounds from my school days. I continued to perform successfully and was interviewed in my home country. It was my first long interview here, though I had done many abroad. I took the opportunity to talk about my father. "Nathan, you come from a musical family, right?" "Yes, my father was a violinist, and my mother a pianist." "Does your father no longer play the violin?" "My father has focal dystonia. It's a common condition among skilled musicians, leading him to quit playing. It's a condition that affects only the ability to play instruments. I misunderstood my father's situation when I was young. We had a rift patch. But before going to Austria, I had a chance to talk with him and understand his condition. He truly was a great violinist. I hope the stigma around this disease disappears, and I dream of establishing a fund to support musicians affected by it." That's a wonderful aspiration. I hope it becomes a reality. This interview gained fame, and my father's violin skills were acknowledged anew. While his condition hasn't improved, he's now often invited as a guest to performances and has taken on a mentoring role for young musicians. Despite claiming he can no longer play, watching young violinists brings him joy, and he's actively involved in the music community. My mother's piano school is thriving with more students than we ever imagined, training the next generation of world-class musicians. Her teaching skills, once considered unknown, are now highly reputed, filling her schedule daily. I couldn't be prouder. As for me, I continue to travel the world with Marie, playing the violin. "Nathan, I'm so glad I met you." "Me too. I'm grateful for you every day. Your effort and passion, and your parents' influence." "Exactly. I feel like I've finally been able to repay them." Marie is also an incredible violinist. We inspire each other like we did in our student days, acknowledging each other's talents and building a strong marriage. And several years later, I was able to establish a foundation for musicians who, like my father, could no longer continue to perform. I donate about half of my earnings from performances to this foundation, while still practicing and performing daily, believing in the power of music and wishing happiness for all who love it. I pray and stand on stage again today. An invitation to a reunion cleverly disguised as a random date selection, ignoring Jessica's schedule. I wonder if she's willing to meet me or not. On the appointed day and time, I headed to the location only we could decipher, as indicated by the secret code. As I walked, heart pounding, I saw a distinctive cross. Swallowing nervously, I hurried to the church. And there, I woke up slowly in bed. The worst. My name is Tyler. I'm just an ordinary 30-year-old office worker. Today was my day off, and I was indulging in laziness, but I had that unpleasant dream again. Lately, I've been frequently dreaming about my middle school days. The dream about that day I've always regretted. The dream is set in the autumn of my 8th grade. I was preparing for the cultural festival alone with a girl. Her name was Jessica Townsley. She was the girl I had a crush on. We were making a sign together. That day, Jessica and I were the only ones who could stay late. Jessica had been complaining that her parents weren't getting along well and she didn't want to stay at home much. Then, I accidentally splattered paint and took out my bag to look for tissues. I ended up spilling the contents of my bag. Textbooks and stationery scattered on the floor. Among them was an anime mascot keychain, which I normally wouldn't carry. I tried to hide it in a panic, but Jessica found it first and started frolicking, saying it was cute with a laugh. At that time, I was hiding my love for anime. I was more sensitive being a teenager. Feeling ridiculed, I took it as mockery. I was so embarrassed and angry. I lashed out at Jessica for being insensitive. Although I usually liked Jessica for being cheerful and outspoken, her innocence annoyed me at that moment. And then, "If you think it's so cute, you can have it." I threw the mascot keychain at Jessica and ran home. Such a dream. In the end, I always wake up to the sight of Jessica's surprised, almost despairing face. How long will I keep dwelling on this? I sighed in bed. The reason I've been carrying this for so long. It's because that was the last day I saw Jessica. The day after I threw the keychain at Jessica. I went to school with mixed feelings. Should I apologize? But she was also at fault. Why was that keychain in my bag? Probably my pet cat played with it and put it in the bag. With my thoughts in disarray and my heart racing, I entered the classroom, but Jessica wasn't there. She usually arrived at school before me. So, I was a bit relieved at that moment. However, Jessica didn't show up even when the morning assembly started. Maybe she's sick, or maybe she was scared off by my attitude yesterday. The questions in my mind were quickly answered by our homeroom teacher, Mr. Robinson. Suddenly, but she is transferring to another school. Mr. Robinson's words just didn't sink in. The whole class was buzzing. But the commotion seemed distant, as if it was happening far away. I remember feeling like it was someone else's problem, standing there dumbfounded. Mr. Robinson stubbornly refused to tell us why she was transferring. There must have been a significant reason. The only thing that comes to mind is the discord between her parents that Jessica had mentioned, but probing further seemed pointless. No matter how much I pry, she would no longer be attending the same school. No matter how much I pry, couldn't undo what happened that day. No matter how much I pry, wouldn't allow me to apologize to her. The last image I had of Jessica was her face, looking desperate and dismayed. Reflecting on my middle school days, I found myself drawing in a notebook. Drawing while lost in thought has been a habit of mine since I was a child. Probably a habit I picked up when I started drawing by imitating the manga and anime I loved. I was drawing a small cross. It brings back memories. The cross was a drawing of a nearby church. A church where Jessica and I often talked after school. Jessica and I first met when we sat next to each other in the beginning of our 8th grade year. We became friends after a little conversation and, though it was wrong, we started whispering to each other during class. But we often got caught and scolded, and many times we couldn't hear each other well. So, I started drawing in the corner of my notebook. I still remember the first drawing. It was a picture of a basketball crying. Jessica looked puzzled when she saw the drawing. I whispered next gym class to her. She seemed to get it right away and chuckled. It meant, I hate that our next gym class is basketball. Then, she quietly wrote hanging there, in her own notebook. For someone as physically uncoordinated as me, that made me enjoy the gym class a little bit. After that, our picture code evolved. We could only use this secret conversation method when our desks were next to each other, so when we weren't seated together, we started using the blackboard at the back of the classroom, where hardly anyone looked. For example, to indicate going to the library during lunch break, I would draw a book and write the number 12. If Jessica came to the library while I was reading, she would silently give me a peace sign. Drawing a cross with the number 16 meant meeting at the church near our middle school at 4 p.m. Yes, we were so close that we would meet after school and talk until curfew. I'm sure it was mutual love. I was too shy to ask her out, hesitating. In the end, not only did I fail to express my feelings, but my adolescent shyness led to hurting Jessica, and that became our last conversation. Even now, it's nothing but regret. Since then, I've been dwelling on those feelings, sometimes dreaming about them, and spending the morning in agony in bed after such dreams. What snapped me out of my daze was the ringtone of my phone. The caller was Alex. He was my best friend from the middle school days I was just reminiscing about. We went to the same high school and still keep in touch frequently. "Hello, Alex. It's been a while." As I answered the phone, Alex sounded cheerful too. "Hey, long time no see." But then he fell silent. Did he call because he needed something? "What's up? Is something going on? Want to grab a drink after such a long time?" When I asked, I could hear Alex's desperate voice. "Please, Tyler, I need your help." As I frowned, Alex began to explain. "Actually, I ran into Mr. Robinson at a bar last week." I felt a slight jolt of surprise. Mr. Robinson was our homeroom teacher during my 7th and 8th grade. In our middle school, there were no class changes between 7th and 8th grade. The idea was to closely observe the students in 7th grade and prepare thoroughly for the high school entrance exams. Meaning, Mr. Robinson was also Jessica's homeroom teacher when she suddenly transferred. Mr. Robinson, that brings back memories. Though I had just been reminiscing about him. I hadn't seen him in person for a long time. Mr. Robinson was so drunk, he suggested we have a reunion. I thought he was just babbling because he was drunk, but then the day before yesterday, he contacted me, handed over a list and everything, all excited about it. I couldn't say no. "Tyler, could you help me organize it?" I couldn't refuse a request from my best friend. "Sure, but I'm not familiar with venues or anything. I've never even been to a reunion, so I don't know much about it." "Alex hasn't done it either." "I don't know much either. That's why I need your help." It seemed likely that two beginners might make mistakes even with mutual help. But with the internet and all its resources nowadays, we should be able to figure out the steps. Alex and I decided to start with sending out invitations and agreed to work on them at his apartment on our next day off. In the meantime, Alex confirmed the date with Mr. Robinson and managed to reserve a venue 3 months in advance. A friend's restaurant agreed to tentatively hold space for up to 30 people. For a first-timer, Alex was quite efficient, which was a huge relief. Mr. Robinson was enthusiastic, and it seemed like Alex was being pushed along by him. A few days later, I went to Alex's apartment, having bought paper for the invitations. Entering his always tidy room, we started by typing up the names from the list into the computer. Glancing through the list, I was shocked. I found Jessica Townsley on the list. I hadn't expected Jessica to be on it. When she transferred, Mr. Robinson stubbornly hid her contact information and continued to feign ignorance thereafter. In fact, I had boldly asked Mr. Robinson for Jessica's contact information on graduation day. A year and a half had passed since she transferred, but Mr. Robinson didn't give me her contact details. "What's up?" Seeing me fixed on the list, Alex spoke up. "Oh, just seeing some familiar names lined up." I replied calmly and turned back to the computer. As I typed in the addresses, my mind was elsewhere. Jessica's address was listed as an apartment near our middle school where we graduated. When did she move back here? Is there any way I can contact Jessica? Should I write a letter separately from the reunion invitation? No, that would be misusing personal information for private purposes. I considered the privileges of an organizer, but it was impossible. I wanted to be honest with Jessica. Then, an idea struck me. I glanced at the kitchen in Alex's apartment. There was a door between the living room and the kitchen. Alex is such a meticulous person. He would surely close that door when using the kitchen. With a bit of excitement about whether my idea would work, I immersed myself in crafting the invitations. It took us 2 hours to finish just 30 invitations. All that's left is to seal them. I'm kind of thirsty. I casually mentioned needing a drink, and Alex, following my lead as I hoped, said, "Yay, definitely. I'll make some coffee." "Thank you," I say, as I watch Alex head towards the small kitchen. As expected, he firmly closed the door, so I quickly searched for the envelope. Finding the one marked for Miss Jessica Townsley, I took out the invitation and swiftly drew a cross. The secret code for the church near our middle school. Then, I added a number to indicate the date and time. After a bit of thought, I added another number. Quickly jotting down just that, I put the invitation back in the envelope. The whole act took only about a minute, but I was nervous Alex might suddenly come back. Afterward, we took a break with some coffee, then sealed the envelopes, and the invitations were complete. "I'll drop these in the mailbox on my way home," I said, standing up. "Thanks, man. Really appreciate it," Alex said as he saw me to the door, and I left his apartment, dropping the invitations into a mailbox one by one on my way home. I paused when I got to Jessica's, looking at it one last time. "I hope you come," I whispered before dropping Jessica's invitation into the mailbox. A few days later, I headed to the church near our middle school. Today was the date I had indicated with the secret code. Just in case, I had also included my phone number, but there had been no contact up to today. It was a date and time chosen without considering Jessica's schedule. If she intended to come but couldn't, she would have called. If she didn't want to meet me, she wouldn't call, and she wouldn't come today. My heart pounding, I saw the distinctive cross as I walked. Swallowing nervously, I rushed to the church, and there stood a woman in a white coat. Her long black hair was distinctive. Jessica used to tie her long hair back in middle school. I slowly approached her. Then, the woman turned around. A small but straight nose, thin lips. And then, those exceptionally large, almond-shaped eyes. Her makeup was natural, her lips a faint pink. Recognizing me, the woman greeted me. Mesmerized by her elegant posture, I managed to speak. "Jessica, thank you for coming." At my words, the woman chuckled. Her smiling face retained the semblance of her youth. Back then, she laughed more heartily. Though she had become more refined and beautiful since our middle school days. It was undoubtedly Jessica herself. Overjoyed, I already felt a tingling sensation in the back of my nose. But I couldn't let myself cry just after our reunion. I held back the tears, clenching my lips tight. "I'm grateful for your message. I knew right away, waiting here at this church today. It felt so nostalgic, I couldn't help but cry," Jessica said. Her words made it even harder for me to hold back my tears. As we walked through the gate and into the garden, we saw a bench by the side. This was where we used to talk until it got dark during our middle school days. Sitting on that bench, I apologized. "I'm really sorry for what happened back then." I sensed Jessica's surprise at my apology. I was hiding the fact that I liked anime. That day we were preparing for the cultural festival, a character keychain fell out of my bag, and you saw it. Even though you laughed innocently, I felt mocked and embarrassed. I lost my temper and said some terrible things. I've always wanted to apologize. I poured out my apology to her. After a while, Jessica gently placed her hand on my shoulder and added some pressure as if to make me look up at her. Feeling like she wanted me to raise my head, I slowly did and looked at her. There were faint tears in her eyes. "I'm the one who should apologize for laughing without considering your feelings. I've regretted it ever since. Wondering why I laughed so much that day. You were right. I was insensitive back then." I vigorously shook my head in denial at Jessica's words. I never thought you were insensitive. Back then, I guess it was more like trying to hide my embarrassment. That's why I said those cruel words. Actually, I liked how straightforward and honest you were, and I thought it was cute. She slowly shook her head at my desperate defense. It's okay. I really was insensitive. That led to my parents' divorce. I was shocked by her words. I knew from Jessica that her parents didn't get along well. She said staying late for the festival preparations and talking with me at the church was a good excuse not to go home. The day I hurt you, when I got home, my mom suddenly said, "We're running away now." She wouldn't tell me why, just that there's no time. It was on a night my dad was on night shift. When Jessica realized that running away meant moving, she panicked and insisted on at least saying goodbye to one person. I had a fight with someone. I didn't want to part ways while still fighting, she said. Her mother yelled at her desperate plea. It's all your fault, you know. Jessica was stunned by those words. Her father's recent irritability seemed to be blamed on her outspokenness. But it was typical complaints of a teenage girl. Wanting to shower before her dad or wanting her laundry done separately. However, her father, stressed from work, couldn't overlook these as just teenage rebellion. Unable to complain directly to his daughter, his anger was directed at Jessica's mother. While Jessica was away, her father would berate her mother, blaming her for everything. It's because of her lack of proper parenting. You must be complaining about me with Jessica behind my back, he said. Even when her mother protested, claiming it wasn't true, he wouldn't listen. And then, an incident happened. In a fit of anger, her father shoved her mother violently. The tremendous shock and the constant verbal abuse made her mother fear for her life. As soon as her father left for his night shift, her mother packed the essentials and waited for Jessica to come home. Then, they fled to a shelter as soon as Jessica returned. Jessica was crying as she told the story. In the end, it was because my father lost his temper and didn't mean to hurt her. They divorced smoothly afterwards, but it was entirely my fault. My behavior tore apart my parents, who were once so close. It's been torturing me. Without wiping her tears, Jessica reached into her white coat's pocket and pulled something out. In her palm. It was the anime mascot keychain I had thrown at her. This has been my talisman. At Jessica's murmur, I found myself murmuring too. A talisman. Jessica slightly raised the corners of her mouth and nodded. It's my reminder not to make thoughtless comments that lack sensitivity. Before I say anything, I touch this keychain to think if it's okay to say it. She explained, smiling through the difficulty. I voiced my thoughts. It wasn't your fault, was it? At my words, Jessica shook her head emphatically. I wanted to hug her, but I continued. I think it was all about timing. Your dad was frustrated with his job. Your mom was stressed from dealing with your dad. And you were just going through adolescence. That's all it was. The trigger might have been Jessica's words. But the cracks were already there. Did your mom say it was your fault? I asked. Jessica shook her head again. No, things hadn't been going well for a while. She said it was her fault that time because she was in a hurry, and I wasn't listening. But that was to spare me from feeling guilty. I cut her off. You're overthinking it. To divorce over a teenage daughter's words, and to me, those words seem trivial. I punched holes in the wall during my rebellious phase and said a lot worse. My parents and I fought. But now we just laugh about how intense my rebellious phase was. The holes in the wall, though, I'll never hear the end of it. At my words, Jessica managed a slight laugh, though her tears didn't stop. I gently hugged her. She tensed for a moment but then relaxed. It must have been hard. All this time. We parted after a fight. I was shocked to suddenly be separated, but now I understand. I wish I could have been there for you during those tough times." Whispering in her ear, Jessica faintly nodded. "Hey, back then, in middle school, we were in love, right?" I ventured. Jessica nodded again. "I kept thinking there was no rush. We were close enough to hang out after school and talk for hours. But after we couldn't meet anymore, I regretted not saying anything sooner." My heart rate quickened. Jessica must have felt it too. "So, now that we've met again, I want to say it. I've liked you since then and never forgot about you. Will you go out with me?" I wished I had prepared something more romantic to say, despite my resolve to ask her out if we met. My straightforward proposal made Jessica blush. "I've liked you too. I couldn't forget," she murmured while clinging to me. Relief washed over me. "I'm so glad. We parted after a fight. All I could remember was your face looking desperate. Even now, I thought maybe you were married or had a boyfriend. I decided to ask you out to settle my feelings, no matter your situation. But I hoped it would work out." I relaxed into Jessica's embrace. She held me firmly. When I received the invitation to the reunion, my heart skipped a beat. I thought I might see you at the reunion, but I was surprised when I saw the contents. That nostalgic drawing of a cross, it was from you. It made me happy to know that you hadn't forgotten about me. Feeling her breath so close. Incredibly comforting. I held back from calling. I wanted to see you. These past few days felt so long. Those days had also felt incredibly long for me. I wanted to meet the next day, but the date was 2 weeks away. Jessica stepped back, smiling at me. "Well, you must have had plans. I didn't even know if you'd be free. I thought about setting it a month later." My flustered response made Jessica laugh. "I'd have died up if I waited another 2 weeks." I found her phrasing endearing. We caught up on each other's lives for a while. After her parents' divorce settled down, Jessica's mom had contacted Mr. Robinson and informed him of their current whereabouts. Jessica and her mother were just beginning to tread a new path, but in order to prevent any confusion, Mr. Robinson decided not to share their contact information with anyone after all. Once they sought refuge in a shelter, it made sense that he became more cautious. As for me, I wish he had secretly shared their contact info when I gathered the courage to ask for it at the graduation ceremony. When Jessica moved out of the shelter to live with her mother, she pondered writing me a letter, but felt it was an atmosphere she couldn't possibly discuss with her mom. She said she hadn't been in touch with her father at all. Seeing Jessica's lonely expression, I couldn't help but speak up. "Maybe you should try writing him a letter." Jessica tilted her head slightly. "I feel like there's still some unresolved tension between you and your parents, and maybe it's better to clear that up." Hearing this, Jessica looked down hesitantly. "But I'm scared of what if my dad still harbors resentment towards me." I don't think that would be the case, but I reassured her by saying, "If that happens, I'll be here to fully support you. You can always cry on my shoulder." At that, Jessica smiled. "Okay, I'll try writing it. I'll check with my mom, and I'll make sure to have a proper talk with her too." Despite her tear-streaked eyes being red, Jessica's smile was very optimistic. Years later. Now, I'm standing at the altar of a chapel, smiling as I watch Jessica slowly walk down the aisle towards me. Walking beside Jessica is her father, from whom she had been estranged. After reuniting with me at a church, she had a proper conversation with her mother. Her mother cried upon realizing that Jessica still believed the divorce was her fault. She regretted that her thoughtless remarks had caused Jessica pain over the years. It seems like making careless remarks was something I inherited from my mom, Jessica said, sticking her tongue out playfully. "I wish she would also stop making gestures that take me pounding." Jessica's parents had started to drift apart when her father's job became more demanding. Her father was busy with shift work, and although Jessica didn't realize it, the only topic between her parents had become about Jessica and school events. Then, a comment from teenage Jessica led to a dispute. When Jessica sent a letter, her father responded with 5 full A4 pages of apologies. With permission, I read it and ultimately felt a deep respect for Jessica's father for honestly admitting that everything was his fault. Meeting him to ask for Jessica's hand in marriage was challenging though. He made sure to thoroughly confirm whether I could truly make her happy. Now, Jessica's parents are slowly starting to communicate again. It's partly because of the wedding, but I sense a good atmosphere between them. I'm not trying to meddle, but maybe it's a good idea to organize a dinner with my parents and her parents once a year. With these thoughts, I smile as I welcome Jessica and her father, who are slowly approaching. When Jessica reaches me, she places her hand on my arm. Her father, with tears in his eyes, gives me a firm handshake. His eyes say, "Please take care of my daughter." I nod emphatically, and as the father smiles and sheds a tear, Jessica and I are united after many years. Gradually, the relationship between Jessica and her parents is improving. Like knitting a scarf that had been undone. I hope that my addition to this will create a scarf with a beautiful array of colors. Looking straight at the officiating priest, I vow to make Jessica utterly happy. I thought to myself, this dream again. It was June, 8 years ago, at Los Angeles International Airport. Standing beside me was Karen, who had just gotten married 2 days prior. We were celebrating the spring of our 6th year together. The preparations for the wedding and moving were overlapping, and we were both a little tired. Our honeymoon destination was Finland. It was a place we both decided on to forget work and everything else and just relax. "Karen, you look a bit pale. Are you tired?" Karen, always the hard worker, rarely showed signs of fatigue to anybody. "Yeah, maybe a little tired. I'll sleep on the plane," Karen said with a smile. "Right, it's a long flight, so it's a good idea to get some rest." I said so while checking the time. But there was no response from Karen. Instead, I heard the sound of something heavy falling and a scream from a lady nearby. In the dream, I kept chanting to myself, "This is just a dream, just a dream." But I didn't want to remember that moment. It was Karen who had fallen to the ground. That became our eternal farewell. I woke up, wiping the tears from my eyes. Every morning I have this dream, I wake up crying. It had been 8 years since Karen passed away. Right before our honeymoon departure at Los Angeles International Airport. She died from a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The doctor said it was like being shot in the heart with a gun. I convinced myself it was better if she hadn't suffered. Otherwise, I felt like my sanity would collapse. My name is Sean. Currently, I'm a 36-year-old architect. The year I married Karen, I started my own firm and became independent. The architectural firm was doing well, and I was starting to make a name for myself as an architect. After Karen's death, I stopped thinking about anything else and devoted myself to work. I believe that's what led me to where I am today. The amount of work I was being offered increased so much that my current setup couldn't handle it all. After discussing it with a friend in the same industry, I decided to hire a new architect. On my desk in the office, there's a schedule for interviews. Since I told my friend I'd prefer someone who is a certified architect, I expect all candidates to be highly skilled. I've interviewed about 5 people so far, but haven't found the right fit yet. At times like this, Karen would say, "Just go with your gut." She always laughed and called me indecisive because I like to proceed with caution in everything. It was the same when we were looking for our new place to live after getting married. No matter how many places we checked out, I couldn't make a decision because nothing seemed just right. Karen had a black cat, so the place had to be pet-friendly. We were looking for a rental apartment because I planned to eventually build our own house. Come on, it's just a temporary place. Make some compromises, Karen said, exhausted from all the viewings, squatting down, not wanting to walk anymore. It's a fond memory. In the end, we settled on the apartment Karen chose. It was a cat-friendly apartment with catwalks installed on the walls. What? So the cat's comfort comes before ours? Of course. Who have I been with longer? Being responded to with a serious face, I've found myself at a loss for words before. The first to step into our new home was the black cat brought by Karen. It entered the room as if it owned a place, turned to look at us standing at the entrance, and meowed as if to say, "Follow me." It was as if the cat was inviting us, and we couldn't help but burst into laughter. The pitch-black cat Karen had. After she passed away, the cat followed her as if not wanting to be left behind. Being left behind even by the cat made me feel miserable. I think I never really won over that cat until the end. Every happy memory with Karen always ends with a sad one. Today at noon, the interview scheduled for 1 p.m. was with a young woman who was about to turn 27. Despite her youth, she apparently held a first-class architect license. The photo on the resume she had sent beforehand had a piercing look, indicating a strong will. I have a hard time dealing with strong-willed women. I thought to myself, maybe today will be another miss. While thinking this, I sipped my after-meal coffee. The woman scheduled for the interview showed up at the office right at 1 p.m. While many candidates come in business suits for job hunting, she was different. She was wearing an oversized black shirt with slim-fit denim. A casual outfit that seemed out of place for an interview. When she entered the office, I almost mistook her for a customer. "I'm Emily, here for the 1 p.m. interview." She introduced herself across the counter, and that's when I knew she was here for the interview. The letter of referral she handed over had the name of my mentor on it. "I'd like to start by hearing about your motivation for applying." Her black hair was cut into a short wolf style, and from her helix down, earrings adorned her ears in order. Her thin eyeliner was flawlessly flicked up, giving her a cat-like gaze. She had a rather unique vibe, but everything seemed to suit her well-groomed features. Before that, allow me to introduce a bit about my work. She said so, and pulled out her laptop. What appeared on the screen were her design blueprints. My design theme revolves around living with pets. The home she designed was for a young couple and their 3 cats. The design allowed cats to freely roam and play throughout the house. It was a layout that easily brought such scenes to mind. Despite its cozy feel, the space is quite spacious. There was a sense of delicacy unique to a woman in her work. Listening to her presentation, my interest in her work suddenly piqued. I wanted to work with her. That thought made me impatient. "You're hired. Please start from tomorrow." For someone as indecisive as me, it was unbelievable to hear those words come out of my mouth. I was surprised, but the others around me were even more so, causing a brief stir in the office. The only one who remained calm was the woman who had come for the interview. She looked as if she knew she would be hired. "I look forward to working with you, Sean." She extended her right hand, and I shook it. It was indeed a slender and small hand, the hand of a young woman. From the next day, she became an immediate asset to our office. The existing staff, motivated not to be outdone by her, began to put in even more effort. The performance of our office started to improve steadily. One evening, as I returned to the office from the site, I found a small cardboard box placed in the narrow space between our office and the neighboring building. "What's that, Sean? What are you doing?" As I was reaching into the gap to move the cardboard box, Emily, who had just returned to the office at the same time, called out to me. "There's a box here," I replied. "Let me see," she said, peering into the dim space. Then, with a look of sudden realization, she slid into the gap between the buildings without a care for her clothes getting dirty. Her white shirt got smeared with black marks from rubbing against the outer wall of the building. When she emerged from the gap holding the cardboard box above her head, her cheeks were also marked with black smudges. "Sean, look at this," she said quietly as she set the box down and opened the lid. Inside were 3 kittens, not yet able to open their eyes, making faint sounds. "What? Cats?" I was surprised to see 3 little black kittens inside the box. "I'll take them to the vet," Emily declared, picking up the box. "I'll get the car ready," I offered. We immediately took the kittens to the veterinary clinic. Although they were a bit weak, we were relieved to hear they were not in any life-threatening danger. The thought of someone abandoning such small lives was horrifying and infuriating at the same time. Emily was listening carefully to the veterinarian, gathering all the necessary care instructions. It seemed she intended to take them home. Watching her lift the treated kittens, I was struck by a sense of déjà vu. It felt like I had encountered a similar scene before. When was that? I pondered, retracing my memories. Yes. It was 8 years ago, on the day of Karen's interment ceremony. The weather was overcast, looking like it might rain at any moment. I never imagined that Karen's ashes would be the first to be placed in the brand new columbarium. The cemetery itself was newly established, with all surrounding graves also being new. It seemed that the grave next to us was also having an interment ceremony. Karen's interment was attended by my parents, her parents, relatives from both sides, and many others. Glancing over to the neighboring grave, I saw a group of students in uniform participating. It appeared the deceased being interred there was still young. Everyone was in tears, mourning their last farewell. Among them, one girl stood out with her straight posture, staring emotionlessly at the grave. She must have been a relative of the deceased. She was holding a portrait to her chest. She wasn't shedding any tears. Her expression was devoid of all emotion, as if she was completely detached from the surrounding sounds. After the interment was over and I had seen off the attendees, I lingered alone in front of the grave for a while. I wanted to smoke a cigarette, but the neighboring grave was still occupied by the other ceremony. I chose to refrain, out of consideration. As I stood there, lost in thought, I overheard whispers from the attendees of the adjacent ceremony, not even crying. I couldn't help but listen in. All I could hear were comments like, "What a cold child." They were probably talking about that girl. Why do people assume that crying is the only way to express grief? Whether it's considered the norm or for some other reason, I believe that everyone grieves in their own way. I wonder if they thought the same about me, I thought in my mind. I couldn't help but laugh at myself, a bit self-deprecatingly. As I was lost in thought, it seemed the burial service next to us had ended. Seeing the adults who were whispering bad things about her now tapping her shoulder and saying, "Stay strong," made me feel sick. Once the murmuring crowd dispersed, the cemetery regained its quiet serenity. I thought about having just one cigarette and searched my jacket pocket. I heard the faint sound of footsteps scraping against gravel. It seemed someone was still at the grave next to us. Looking over, I saw her standing alone in front of the grave, holding a portrait. She suddenly turned towards me, as if she noticed my gaze. "Can you cry?" I was more surprised by my own words slipping out than she was, but she remained composed even when addressed. "The sadness hasn't reached me yet. It hasn't penetrated deep enough for me to feel it." she said, pointing to her chest with slender fingers. She said the one who passed away was her brother. Whether it was an accident or he took his own journey is unclear. She shared that something had indeed happened at school. I recalled the group of students in uniforms who attended. I didn't think she was lying. It's creepy how they can just cry so easily, isn't it? She said, noticing the frown on my face and giving a faint smile. Who decided that you have to cry when you are sad? People cry even when they are not, she commented. I nodded slightly to her words. Who decided how we're supposed to act in these situations? When Karen passed away and I didn't shed a tear, my friend said, it's okay to cry. Hearing that made me feel uncomfortable. Perhaps she feels the same way. What she's feeling is despair. Thinking about the person who has suddenly disappeared from your world. Never being able to hear their voice, talk, or laugh together again. From your everyday life, only that person is missing. No matter how much you pray to God or perform memorial services, you can never meet them again. To dismiss this as merely sadness is absurd. This is despair. A feeling of falling deeper and deeper into darkness without any words. You weren't crying either, she observed. I guess the sadness hasn't reached me yet, I replied. She smiled slightly at that. She looked younger when smiling than when showing no expression. Just then, we heard a small meow. For a moment, our eyes met in surprise. The sound of a kitten came from somewhere. She handed me her brother's portrait and started looking for the source of the sound. Without caring about getting her morning dress dirty, she knelt on the ground, peered into small gaps, and pushed her way into the underbrush. Then she exclaimed, "Found it." Only her slender arm stretched out from the underbrush, clutching a kitten. The black kitten meowed softly. She told me it was placed in a cardboard box deep in the woods. Its eyes were barely open, still very young. It's a kitten that needs milk, not yet ready for solid food. I'll take it home. It must be fate, she said, cradling the kitten close to her chest and reaching out her hand to me. When I handed her the brother's portrait, she tucked it under her arm. Then, see you around somewhere, Sean. The sight of her leaving, holding a cat, overlapped with the present image of Emily holding a cat in front of me. As she left, she definitely called my name. Wait a minute, Emily. We've met before, right? At the cemetery. I suddenly exclaimed. She nodded without surprise, as if it was about time I realized it. Emily in front of me was the same person I met during Karen's burial. You took quite a while to notice, she said. Standing there, she casually handed me a kitten as if it was the most natural thing to do. I accepted it, going with the flow. Being here, like this, handing you a cat, it's all natural. You would accept it, wouldn't you, Sean? Emily mentioned that she recognized me as the architect Sean when she saw me standing by Karen's grave. Her brother, who aspired to be an architect, had cherished an interview article of mine. Seeing me at the cemetery, she felt it was like her brother's persistent wish to meet me, which she found amusing. Emily became an architect to honor her brother's wishes. She gave her a smile, saying she didn't have any particular dreams of her own. So, coming to my office was also no coincidence, I said. Yes, of course, it wasn't a coincidence. I insisted quite a bit to get that letter of referral, she revealed. The truths she disclosed fit together like a puzzle. But why? I asked, puzzled even with the knowledge of her following her brother's wishes. Because, Sean, you weren't crying. With a troubled look, Emily answered. The speed of grief differs from person to person. Back then, none of the adults around understood. She seemed to have been despairing about that on the day of the burial as well. Then, seeing me, expressionless and holding a portrait by the neighboring grave, made her happy. Finding someone who shared the same feelings was comforting. Emily quietly concluded her story with these words. As she spoke, the kittens curled up on her lap, softly purring in their sleep. Watching her tenderly stroke the small backs, I remembered the slender arm that reached out from the underbrush that day. What happened to that kitten from back then? Would it be okay if I raised these little ones? I asked. Emily looked surprised for the first time. She had intended to raise all three herself. I mentioned that Karen, while she was alive, had a black cat. I also talked about how the black cat passed away, seemingly following Karen in death. If it's okay with you, Sean, please take care of them. The kitten from that time is still doing well at my place, she said. The kitten from that time was still with her. You're lucky to have been found by someone so kind, I said as Emily gently stroked the kitten, which stretched its limbs in contentment. Thus, the three black kittens were taken in by me. I even lifted each one up to show Karen's portrait. Now, the kittens run around the third floor of my office where I live and work, making it a lively place. I'm truly grateful none of my employees are allergic to cats. Their presence has naturally brought more laughter into the office. Everything seems to be moving in a positive direction. I felt this way every day. Ever since the black cats arrived, it seemed like the architecture firm began to thrive again. People say black cats are a bad omen. As I watched the kittens being pampered by the employees and murmured this, Emily told me, you know, in the States, black cats are considered lucky cats. Emily looked at me with an expression that said, can't believe you didn't know that. No, but you see, in other countries. But we're here in the States, aren't we? She snorted in amusement, and I was left speechless. The employees who overheard our conversation burst into laughter. Feeling embarrassed, I was scratching my head when Lisa, a clerk who had been with us since the start, came over and said, Sean, you've become more gentle. Perhaps she was right. After Karen passed away, the void that was left seemed to be filled by the black cats and Emily. The dream I had of Karen this morning didn't end in sadness. We went to see the cherry blossoms together, and a drunk Karen tumbled down the embankment, laughing in the stream. I have completely forgotten such memories, but they came back to me in my dream. I woke up laughing with her. For the first time since Karen passed away, I woke up from a dream about her without crying. Black cats as lucky cats. Watching the kittens running around, I indeed felt that was true, and it made me happy. On Karen's death anniversary, I went to visit her grave alone. I bought her favorite flowers and placed a cream puff in front of her grave. I had something important to discuss with Karen today. Kneeling down, I clasped my hands and spoke to Karen. Then something incredible happened. If you hesitate, they'll slip away. They are cats, after all. That was definitely Karen's voice. I looked around in surprise, but no one was there. I stared at the grave, dumbfounded. Karen had told me something similar in the past. As I reminisced, happy memories came flooding back. Yes, these words were spoken to me by Karen the first time I entered her room. Having never touched a cat before, I was frozen in place, facing the black cat in Karen's home. I wondered whether I should pet it or pick it up. Now I understand that just being there beside it is enough. But at that time, I had no idea. Karen, thanks for listening to my concerns. I took out my phone and selected Emily's number from my contacts. After taking a deep breath, I made a call. Hi Sean, did something happen? Because it's unusual for you to call on the weekend. She must be at home. I could hear the sound of a cat meowing in the background of Emily's voice on the phone. That black kitten we found here back then. It felt like it connected Emily and me. "Listen, I don't want you to just slip away, but I need you to hear me out." Saying that, I felt my heart racing as if I were back in my school days. Was confessing love always this nerve-wracking? It was the first time since Karen's death that I tried to express my feelings, and I struggled to find the right words. Emily laughed on the other end of the line as I stumbled over my words. "Don't make me wait too long, or I'll slip away because I'm kind of feline. Please hurry up and say you love me. I'll wait for another 5 seconds." I gave her a smile and scratched my head at Emily's cheeky words. It felt as if Karen was laughing her head off beneath the grave. 5 seconds isn't enough, so wait for me until we can meet tomorrow." With that, I ended the call. A little teasing like this should be forgivable. Surely, she must be pouting with her cheeks puffed up, calling me indecisive. Now, how should I express my feelings to her tomorrow? As if to give me a gentle nudge, a soft breeze blew.
"All right, everyone's presentations are done," Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.